Hey, thanks for joining me on another episode of the Donavan Starghill Show. Donald Trump is running circles around the Democrat Party and the legacy media. Kendrick Lamar has dropped the double entendre heard around the world, and we'll take a closer look at what all you might already be hearing about Elon Musk and DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency. Let's get into it. I actually wanted to take a look at some of the things that Trump has been doing, and I found an article by the BBC, and as left-leaning as it could be, just was trying to pick out some things that I really wanted to talk to you about, but the article did a pretty decent job of breaking it down, kind of used some language that I could probably go back and forth with, but let's just focus in on real quick on just some of the high points. Government spending. We have, of course, DOGE and Elon Musk. We'll get into that a little bit later. We also have some freeze on federal hiring. To go along with that, we've seen some adjustments with defense and the Defense Department. We know that Pete Hegseth being installed as the Secretary of Defense, and also the border wall that's being refortified there. To go along with it, birthright citizenship has been reined in. Also, terrorist groups like the drug cartels as well as MS-13 have been put on high alert, rather known as terrorist watch lists. These organizations have now been deemed as terrorist organizations. And we're also seeing some tariffs between China, Canada, and Mexico. We also know that the Green New Deal has been put to an end. So, it really just goes on and on. Diversity and gender. We see that the NCAA has kind of backtracked on their position. We see that transgender athletes will no longer be allowed to compete. And also DEI having a bit of a sundowning in federal organizations as well. And of course, TikTok being rescued by the 75th president. And of course, some pardons to kind of, I'm just leading off with the Democrat Party at this point, and the legacy media really don't know where to go in terms of trying to pin President Trump down on any positions that he's taken, because he's taken them so rapidly. You hear that we're going to rename the Gulf of Mexico into the Gulf of America, and before they can really get into an uproar with that, then he's announcing that, we're thinking about buying Greenland, and then making strides to potentially bring Canada in as a 51st state. And before they can even speak on that, we're talking about going into Gaza and totally revamping the place. And before they can start to pin them down on any of that conversation, we have the transgender athletes. We see that the NCAA put out a statement saying that they're no longer going to allow for these men to cross over and compete against women. And it's just a circus that the media is caught up in terms of these quick, fast decisions being made. You're looking at the jugglers one moment, the next thing you know, you got the tigers being tamed, and then you got the guys in the motorcycle pit, and they don't know what to talk about. And I feel like that's a great strategy that President Trump has put in place. It's keeping these folks on their toes. He said that there were going to be swift changes. These are promises made, promises kept, and the Democrat Party and the legacy media really don't know down from up right now. It feels like they can't find anything that he's doing that the American people didn't elect him for. And however they want to take a negative stance towards it, they're really having a hard time finding footing on a unified talking point, because one minute it's this, the next minute it's that, and then we're on to the next thing after that. And it's just got to be causing a lot of confusion on Capitol Hill when it comes to these lawmakers, these Democrat Party leaders that are in office to do everything that they can to stymie his efforts. And as soon as they muster up any type of a response. Now we're pulled into another conversation. The legacy media, they're having a hard time keeping up as well. And I think it's an amazing time for us as Americans because, again, you really don't see politicians come into office after making all of these campaign promises and then at the end of a 4-year term being able to look back and see how many of those were fulfilled. We've been able to see campaign promises fulfilled. I think we're about 3 weeks in, if not getting close to a month in, to the 47th administration, and they're just, again, running all sorts of high points for the agenda, and I think it's amazing. Donald Trump has gotten Elon Musk and a gang full of hyper-intelligent young adults to take a look at the U.S. aid and where the money is being spent, how it's being spent, and really just to take a closer discussion at what we're seeing with USAID and these young adults. Think about if you're, an accounting wizard or you're a computer guy and you really want to, prove yourself in terms of being able to do swift data analytics, and you just so happen to come into the fold and recruitment by one of the top leaders in terms of technology. This guy's sending rockets to outer space better than NASA. He's created so many different technology companies. And so now you're a young person looking to prove yourself, and you have the opportunity to be on the biggest stage. And all we can hear from the Democrat media and the legacy media and the Democrats are conversations about these kids, belittling them, these young adults that are just only looking to carve out their place in the world, keying in on this one username from a 19-year-old, big balls. They're all upset about it, but what they can't be upset about more than that is how efficient we're starting to learn what in the hip-hop Holy Ghost is actually going on behind the scenes, and these Democrat leaders are upset about it. Let's take a pause to see what the press secretary has been saying about some of the things that we're learning in terms of the findings over at DOGE with the help of Elon Musk and his team.
Brian.
Yes. I want to go back to DOGE just for a second. Earlier, the subcommittee headed by Chairman Marjorie Taylor Greene, her and her staff discovered $2.7 trillion in improper payments to Medicare, Medicaid, overseas, to people who should not have gotten it. Some of this room might have missed that press conference. Can you elaborate on what the president is thinking at this point?
Well, again, that's another example. There's a very long list of the fraud, waste, and abuse that DOGE is identifying on a daily basis. Elon Musk also talked about yesterday about Social Security payments that are going out the door for people who are no longer with us. Unfortunately, I would say that is certainly fraud. There's also a lot of contracts they've identified that, just as a hypothetical example, are $1 million, but only 500,000 went out the door. So where's the rest of that cash? And so that's the thing. Those are the things that DOGE is working on every single day. And I would just remind everybody in this room, this is what President Trump campaigned on doing. He's delivering on a promise that 77 million people elected him to do.
That's right. That's right. Again, promises made, promises kept. I think it's an amazing time right now. So really quick, want to turn the conversation to something more entertainment related. A lot of you folks, just like myself, were keyed in on the big football game. If you can see, I have my green on. It's my ode to those Philadelphia Eagles. I think a lot of us, like myself, really didn't have much skin in the game. I mean, the Super Bowl normally comes down to, right, only the last two teams that are left. And if you weren't a Philadelphia fan, or if you weren't a Kansas City Chiefs fan, then, maybe you were just watching, like many of us do, to just tune in to the big final game of the year. At the same time, I think there was a lot of anticipation around this game as the Kansas City Chiefs were set to create history with a three-peat, and then, of course, a rematch with Jalen Hurts and the Philadelphia Eagles to see who would come out on top. And if you were to read the final score of that game, I think 95% of anybody who's watched football for the last 2 years would have said that that final score was held up by the Chiefs. And surprisingly enough, we saw that the Philadelphia Eagles certainly came away with a dramatic victory. And I think the final score really doesn't denote the actual way the game transpired. But of course, on the backdrop of all of that, just like every year for quite some time now, we've talked about this impending Super Bowl halftime performance. And I know a lot of folks were saying that it was the worst performance ever and they didn't like it. Fair enough. I will say, and I had this discussion with my wife, that this year and every year I feel like they do the Super Bowl halftime show to speak to, of course, a broad audience and an audience that, is relative to football. And I think they really try to do as much as they can to, have it to kind of really be for all of those in attendance, whether you be in person or abroad at home or wherever you're watching. And I think when they put together these shows, they really kind of look at genres that might not be so heavily aligned with the interests of the players and future players. And I think that this Super Bowl halftime was a display of kind of really being in sync with the predominant genre. And I have no data to back this up, or I have no surveys that I've conducted, but I think that it would be responsible to say that the predominant genre of music, if you're talking about pre-game or during practices or a trip to the practice field, so on and so forth, if you're a football player, you're probably listening to rap music. And I think the decision that was made to have a rapper featured at the halftime show spoke to the genre, again, that is predominant amongst athletes, especially those participating in the game and those that will probably participate in years to come. And also seeing as that we've never had a feature presentation of a specific rap artist. Now, if I were to say hip hop, you might be able to catch me up in that. I think we've seen Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg and 50 Cent. They've been involved. Beyonce. I would consider those artists to be more hip hop artists. If we're talking about pure lyricists, pure rap artists, pure MC, we most certainly saw the most contemporary and the most prolific contemporary rap MC performed at the Super Bowl. And to go along with that, to be the most prolific, the most dominant rap MC, you couldn't, I don't think, win that space unless you've been involved in some sort of back and forth with one of your peers, one of your rap colleagues, if you will, in what is known as a rap beef. And we actually saw the rapper in today's contemporary rap music perform, and I would say very well. To go along with that, part of MCing and being able to get on stage as a rapper is to be able to project with clarity, and then in a space like this, also to project with clarity and be able to censor yourself. As we know, rap music is wrought with all sorts of derogatory and foul language. And so to be able to present clearly and do so while self-censoring is a feat in and of itself. And I feel like without even considering what I enjoyed to go along with it, if you were to say DJing, breaking, MCing, and graffiti are all elements that make up hip hop culture. We saw on display prominent MCing and coupled with some really good hip hop dancing as well. And so I'm going to say that I enjoyed the Super Bowl halftime show with Kendrick Lamar. And of course, if you are a rap fan, a rap music listener, and you are in tune with the contemporary culture, you would have been top of mind wondering if he was going to perform the They Not Like Us diss track to one of the other predominant for the last decade plus rap artists in the space, that is a prolific diss song, if you will. One that's also under further scrutiny due to the lawsuit that has been filed by Drake to Universal Music. I thought that if I were to make some critiques about his performance, I would probably fall in line with some of the critiques that I heard from Charlemagne the God, where the set list could have been better. There could have been some punchier songs in terms of his catalog, and songs that a lot more households would have been more familiar with. And so without further ado, I do want to take a look at that performance with you.
Controlling like a, ain't you tired? Trying to strike a chord and it's probably A minor. They not like us. No, they not like us.
All right, yeah. So ultimately, I think along with the audience, Kendrick Lamar just put a nail in the coffin of that historic rap beef. I think there's probably some more to come when it comes to the shakeout with the lawsuit that Drake has with Universal Music. I don't think that at this point he's named Kendrick Lamar specifically. I want to say he's trying to drag Universal Music and Spotify into court, and the behind that is to say he's alleging that Universal Music was in contracts with Drake in terms of renewing their agreements, and they didn't want to pay what Drake wanted. And so in order to diminish his career, they went out and pushed Kendrick Lamar's song. Kendrick Lamar actually is with the label Interscope that is also underneath Universal Music Group. And so they used the artist that they have control of in terms of exposure and leverage some of their capabilities to push this song to scuttle or to demean Drake's career, to devalue his position in terms of contract renegotiations. And so he's alleging that in court, that, again, it seems like he has some kind of knowledge on how this all can happen, seeing as that he's an artist who might have profited from Universal Music Group using some of the same tactics that he's alleging that they used for Kendrick Lamar. Nonetheless, in terms of, I think, just pop culture, means, if you will, that this argument of who the best rapper and who's been able to position themselves with the highest acclaim in terms of rap lyrics, this conversation is over. When you have a stadium full of, people that are of, all sorts of demographics and backgrounds, and, a very diverse audience like what you find at the Super Bowl, to allege that there were bots making this song bigger than what it was. And, you had a whole stadium full of people that chimed in at the end there when you hear the crowd go A minor. You got Stephen A. Smith, who has himself said that he's very much familiar with the song and that part of the song. So yeah, that had to be a dark day for the OVO fan base and for Drake himself, for billions of people during the Super Bowl to be singing such damning lyrics with your nemesis. But yeah, the conversation of who's the top dog in terms of, and funny to say top dog, TDE, of hip hop, or rather even rap MCs, I think the crown goes to Kendrick Lamar. And again, back to what I was saying though, this performance was for those, we've seen Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. We've seen, I love ZZ Top. We've seen, NSYNC. We've seen all sorts of genres come through the Super Bowl stage. We've never seen an MC get up and spit it the way he did. I don't think that I'm just aware of an MC who could have been, and that's what I was telling my wife during the performance. Like, look at all this cardio this guy's doing. He's here, he's there, he's walking upstairs, he's, pacing up and down the field. All right, so just to top this off again, I want to look at another clip here about what's been circulating in terms of the Department of Government Efficiency, also known as DOGE. We know that the Democrats are in uproar, but I do want to share a clip that I found from a guy on the internet. I believe he goes by the Older Millennial. Kind of breaks this down. I'm not sure how haphazardly you would say, but I do like the breakdown, so I'll share that with you.
Everything you need to know is on this chart. Let me explain. So this shows all of our government spending. Obviously, it's going to tick up a little bit every year because of inflation. But if you look at where you have bigger jumps, it's always because of a crisis, which totally makes sense. We have to spend more to get out of that crisis. However, if the additional spending was to take care of that crisis, once the crisis is over, our spending should return to pre-crisis levels. Like, you see the '08 housing crisis, it jumped up and it stayed. There is no reason for that. Or you see COVID, jumped up huge. Then we finished with COVID and it stayed. There is no valid reason for that to happen, except that our government will never be willing to spend less now than they did last year. Even if that additional spending was for a crisis, they are never willing to give up all the stuff they started spending money on. Shit we only allowed them to spend that money on because it was a crisis. And now that the crisis is gone, they just find new shit to spend that money on. And that's why something like DOGE is so fucking important.
All right. I mean, probably the best thing to say about that is it's a hot take. I think it's a valid hot take, very much glossed over. Same time, it doesn't make any sense for our spending to keep on increasing. And then at the same time, if it is going to increase, we should know about it. We should know why. We should have some type of a line by line readout on tell me why we're spending this much. Tell me why we're spending on what. Break it down for us, government. It seems like there's been, for some reason, some resistance to do that amongst the federal government, and maybe Maxine Waters can let us know why.
Violated because the people of this country are being violated because all of our privacy is being taken up by Elon Musk and Trump, and we don't know what all they have on us. We don't know what all they have on us.
Interesting. We don't know what all they have on us. What all they have on us, like, what do you mean? Is Maxine Waters referring to the $6 million to transform digital spaces to reflect feminist democratic principles? Or the $2.1 million to help the BBC value the diversity of Libyan society? Or the $10 million worth of USAID funded meals which went to an Al-Qaeda linked terrorist group? Or the $25 million for Deloitte to promote green transportation in the country of Georgia? Or maybe she's talking about the $2.5 million to promote inclusion in Vietnam. Or maybe she's really thinking that we should know about the $16.8 million for a separate inclusion group in Vietnam, or about the $5 million to Eco Health Alliance, one of the key NGOs funding bat virus research at the Wuhan lab, or maybe the $20 million for a group related to a key player in the Russiagate impeachment hoax. $20 million in that. $1.1 million to an American LGBT group. $1.2 million to help the African Methodist Episcopal Church Service and Development Agency in Washington build a state-of-the-art 440-seat auditorium, or maybe the $1.5 million to promote LGBTQ advocacy in Jamaica, or the $2 million to promote LGBTQ equality through entrepreneurship in Latin America. I mean, the list goes on and on. I don't know what $2 million to promote LGBT equality through entrepreneurship in Latin America does for America or, the United States. I mean, you tell me. I would love to hear a breakdown on that. At the same time, again, this is like not even kind of a snippet of what we're finding. And yeah, maybe $10 million here, 2.1 million, 16.8 million here, doesn't necessarily add up into, or, maybe what it is that it adds up into, again, these trillions of dollars like we heard the press secretary, Carolyn, talk about. And where is this money going to? Whose hands are they winding up in? And how do we know that it's even being spent for that at the end of the day? So, it's maybe what, they have on us is maybe that's some of what, she's worried about is when we figure out, what accounts these funds wound up in, that it might not look so great for some of these folks that are crying like little babies over where the American tax dollars are being spent. If they were really being spent to help Americans, then, what's the cause for outcry? Why can't we know about it? Why shouldn't we know about it? Why would you be upset that we're learning about it? And they try to, come out and say these things like Elon Musk is stealing Social Security. Well, if anybody's stealing Social Security from anybody in this country, surely if the richest man in the world is supposedly doing it, what about the people who don't have that much money? What if the richest man in the world has an incentive to spend his free time combing through the budget that, combing through where American tax dollars are being spent? If he's incentivized to do that in his free time, then what about the people who, are controlling these dollars? What incentives might they have? What incentives are out there for somebody who doesn't have as much money as Elon Musk? If the richest man in the world is incentivized to do it, then what's to say that people that don't have as much money as him aren't incentivized? So pretty ridiculous, the things that they're trying to pick fights over. This DOGE thing is one that's pretty eye-opening. We're going to see how this all unfurls. There's clips after clips of Democrats throwing a hissy fit and, saying that he's got access to, this guy's been collecting payment information since he invented PayPal. So, what private information can't we not trust them with? If we can't trust this guy, who can we trust? This guy's already controlling so many other pieces of private information. And oh, by the way, the government has this information. It's already been turned over to people who make an hourly wage. There's people that make an hourly salary or make a salary, an hourly wage, that have access to this information. So it's not like it's secretive to the government. Anyways, I think it's all pretty ridiculous. I think these people are finding themselves to be really embarrassed. I think we're going to get down to a space where we really understand how uncovering this information really hurts the people that are crying uncle. And, maybe they're a little bit more beholden to Uncle Sam than they'd like for us to know. All right, thanks for joining me on another installment of the Donavan Starghill Show. Let me know in the comments what you thought about the Super Bowl halftime performance by Kendrick Lamar. And also, tell me what you think about the job that Elon Musk is doing over there at the Department of Government Efficiency. Until then, take care. We'll see you next time.